Okay, good morning. Wanted to make a little instructional or educational video here about muscle strains, tears, what they are, why they happen, and the recovery of such. This came to mind because one of the clients I was working with at her office strained her calf, hurt her calf. Obviously didn't know it was a strain, hurt her calf during a kickboxing class, was scared, wasn't sure what was going on, worried about that she would miss the testing and some of the things at the end. After 5-6 weeks of working hard and making gains, she was worried she was going to miss out on the final testing. And so we were able to go see her, figure it out, get her back going so she didn't miss any of that testing. I wanted to start. Let's see if I can share the screen. And so here's a pic. So we got to first talk about what a muscle is. Let's blow this up just a little bit here. There we go. So we kind of think of muscles maybe as being these either round or flat, pieces of tissue in our body. But it's what you see kind of in pictures. But really what happens is these things are bundles. If you see right here, the myofibril is the smallest or the contractile unit of the muscle. These are all put together into these muscle fibers, okay? The fibers are then grouped together into these bundles. And the bundles, and usually there's fascia tissue on the outside. The bundles are then grouped together into larger, and then all of these bundles, all these muscle bundles, then create a full muscle belly. So you can see all the individual little myofibrils and muscle fibers that group into bundles and then group into a big muscle. So that's the part that's interesting to know, because when I talk about later the strain or the tearing of them, it has to do with where along this muscle the fibers were either torn or strained, all the way through, part of the way through, just a few. And so that's the anatomy part is important to know that. So now why are there a bunch of fibers like this versus one big muscle all by itself? The reason that we have that is modulation. So we don't just use the muscle as a whole unit all the time. Our bodies are broken down into these smaller units because of the reason for modulation and for precision tasks. So we have all of these little individual fibers and bundles so that we can, our bodies are amazing at efficiency. They're not going to use more force than needed to perform the work or the task. So something as simple as picking up a paper clip to something as explosive and powerful as jumping or kicking depends on how many of these fibers are used. So because it's so efficient, this is called recruitment. When your body recruits a certain number of fibers, it does so based on the amount of force or work you need to perform that task. The harder the task is, the brain and the nervous system, as it runs down to the muscle, kicks in or recruits more of the fibers to perform the task. So it's amazingly fast, and we don't think about it, but that's the difference. But let's say you're pushing on something against the ground, and you're moving a box, and then you have a certain number of fibers to move that box against the coefficient of friction on the ground. But if that box starts to stick, you instantly start pushing more force, and your body then recruits more fibers to get that thing moving. So that's what a muscle is, and that's important to understand so that the next part of this talk, or this educational part, makes sense when we talk about how a muscle tears. So if the muscle, here's how a muscle tears. Second, if it's subjected to a load that's too large, or the strain is too large, and it doesn't have the adequate time to respond to that movement, then you can get some tearing or stretching of these fibers. Okay, so that can happen when, say, the task itself is too heavy, it's too much force I try to lift something up, and the weight of it is more than my muscle can recruit the fibers and move that force. Then that muscle has a chance to stretch or tear. It can also happen if there's not enough time to fully recruit all of this, this is more with like high intensity things like sprinting or jumping. If the muscle doesn't have enough time to recruit enough fibers to perform the task, some of those fibers can tear. Now, the other thing we have to think about is a muscle contracts in two different ways. We typically think of muscles as contracting only in one way, a shortening, but there's actually a shortening called the concentric, and then a lengthening called the eccentric contraction. So when I do a bicep curl, I'm shortening, that's the concentric, but remember, there's still tension under that muscle, under that load when I let the weight back down. And so that's important because a lot of times muscle tears and strains happen in the eccentric or the negative phase, or the deceleration phase of when you're swinging or throwing, running with the hamstring, that kind of thing. The other way they can happen is when you've had a previous injury to this muscle. The areas you can see in the areas of the muscle, if you had some tearing or some damage in some of these fibers, there'll be scar tissue that lays down. That part's not the same as the natural or the normal part of the muscle. And some restrictions or scar tissue or maladaptive healing to some of those will cause, or it's a weak spot. That can be a place where those contractions or where those tears can happen again. Now, the different kinds of tear. I want to show you the different kinds of tears here. So we'll talk about the different kinds of tears. So a grade 1 tear is a mild tear. It's very common. There's some stretching and maybe some minor, very small, low percentage, that's maybe 5% or less of tearing of the fibers. So these will hurt, but you generally won't have any loss of strength. They'll be painful when you contract it, or mobility. And the recovery for these is quite good and can be quite fast. It's pretty common. Grade 2 is the next grade. So now you actually have some tearing of those fibers. Now, but look, see, there's still fibers that are intact. So you'll still be able to move that joint, but it'll be more painful. There'll probably be some weakness involved now because some of the fibers that you have are not connected anymore. There's going to be some weakness there and increased pain. Now, there'll also, because of the tearing and the bleeding of that injured tissue, there's going to be some swelling and probably some discoloration or bruising, similar to this. So here you can see the back of the leg there, probably a hamstring or maybe even an adductor on the inside of the leg. Easily grade 2, tear or strain. Now, not even the words tear and strain, they mean the same thing. Don't be confused by that. If you say a muscle strain or a tear, that's synonymous with each other. So the grade 2, you start having some of this ecchymosis or this bruising because of the bleeding. This will be a little more, this takes us a little bit longer time. Whoop. Oh no, I want to share that screen again. Still going here, so let's get back to my, there we go. So that's not the one I wanted to show you, but okay, I lost my other pictures. That's okay, we'll get back to that one. So the grade 2 is the one where we had that, stop sharing the screen here. There we go. Grade 2 is the one where we had the tearing and the swelling. Grade 3, now, if you remember that picture, I lost the picture. It stopped on the computer. But that's a complete rupture. And actually, we can share it. We'll go right into grade 3 because here is the grade 3 setting of the photos here, if I can get that one. Oh, there's one of them. Let's find it here. Biceps. There. Okay, so there's a grade 3 tear right there. And sometimes you see that when the muscle, either through the belly of the muscle, at the musculotendinous juncture, which I didn't talk about yet, I'll explain, or at the tendon level, completely tears all the way through, and then the muscle just balls up, and because the contractile forces ball that muscle up. Now I will go back and explain that. I didn't explain that before. So as those muscle, let's go back to that picture there, if I can get back to that picture of the muscle itself. There we go. So so now once you get all these muscle belly together, now you have this fascia, or this contractile, or the connective tissue on the outside. That's the muscle belly. As that moves and gets toward an end down here, it's gonna change and get thicker and stronger, and then turn into a tendon. And the tendon then attaches to a bone. And that's how we have our movements of our extremities, is that way. So the muscle, the tears can happen in the belly of the muscle, in the middle, at the musculotendinous juncture where that tissue starts to change, or from the actual tendon all the way down to at the bone level. So the grade 3 requires much more. Here's a good picture. Yeah, there. So there's the muscle tissue. There's the fascia. As this starts to change into tendon, there's the musculotendinous juncture. There's the tendon as it attaches to the bone, and the tears can happen anywhere along this whole process here. So the time frame then, the grade 1, grade 2, or sorry, grade 1, very simple. We're going to have probably, 2 to 3 weeks. You're going to get back to moving pretty quickly. You want to start doing that and moving as fast as possible, because you don't have the actual structural damage, and you need to move that and get it healing and start that going right away. The grade 2 is more, that takes a little bit longer. Now that's more severe, and that physiologically you have to remember that the muscles, the tissues take 6 to 8 weeks to lay down that. And you're going to get fibrinogen, collagen, new contractile tissue start laying down. And that's going to take some time to get that thing working. Now, the first safe, it goes in phases. You're going to have an acute phase, a subacute phase, and then more of a remodeling or return to function type phase. That first acute phase, there's going to be a good, 48 hours there where you're just going to probably have to rest and ice and let that thing calm down. It's going to be angry. It's going to be swollen, probably some bruising. But then after that 48 hours, 48 to 72 hours, it's going to need some active movement. You're going to need to contact or work with a physical therapist, someone who is knowledgeable and can teach you the correct ways to move to help that thing scar down appropriately, so you don't get those maladaptive tissues or those scar tissue formation where you'll be more apt to tear it again in the future. So this is a part where you're going to need to move and get going for that in that subacute phase to get the healing, and then slowly work into the return to function. Now this might be, like I said, on average, probably around the 6 to 8 weeks, maybe back to full activity by maybe 2 months. The grade 3 or the complete rupture tear, much more serious. I mean, obviously there's going to be obvious deformities. There's going to be dents. There might even be like that bicep one you showed you where the muscle just balls up. Those at times can be conservatively treated with time. The body can, scar those down. There's always going to be probably a weird formation or deformity there. But sometimes, many times there actually are surgical candidates. And so the healing process is totally different. There's going to be a much longer healing process for the tissue to take and to start scarring down. And then you'll absolutely need to work with, a physical therapist to get yourself back through again, same phases. That does not change. The acute, the subacute, and the remodeling phase. But this will just take longer. We're talking probably more like 4 to 6 months before you're at, high level of activity. But that was kind of a brief overview. I also had a document I'm going to share. I'll put up either on my website or on the blog where I went through. It's about 4 pages and kind of explains this stuff that I just talked about to you a little bit more in depth than what I touched on here. But please take a look and see if you had any questions, or if this happened to you and maybe you had a strain or a tear in the past, it healed, you started doing stuff again, and hamstrings are notorious for this. Feel better, all of a sudden, boom, it tears again, you get that same pain. And those are ones that we can work on. You have to remodel that tissue. You've got to get it where that new scar tissue and that contractile scars down and remodels appropriately, so you don't have a maladapted scar where all the tissue's all nasty. And you got to get it to more parallel lines of strength, so those contractile elements have the ability to contract, and relax. And that's why you'll have ranges. Like, think about the shoulder. When you raise your shoulder up, it's like no pain, no pain. Oh, there's the pain, and then it's gone again. You got that painful arc is because of the modulation and the recruitment. So when your body is initially moving the arm, it's good tissue, doesn't hurt you. Once you get to a certain point, oh, there's the bad muscle tissue, the scar, that's where it hurts. Then once you're past it, oh no, it's fine again. It's because along that line of all those muscles, some of them are fine or are native or natural, and some have a little bit of scar on them, and they're kind of crossed up. And then once you recruit or those tissues, that's where it hurts. But if you don't ever recruit those tissues, so you can do things down here, like, oh, it doesn't really bother me, it's fine. It's only when I do certain things, I can turn it on and I can turn it off. Typically that's good because of that muscle, but something we can talk about again. So that was kind of a brief overview. kind of long here, but if any other questions, let me know. Websites, www.exechealthsolutions.com. Of course, you can get a hold of me anyway, cell phone, email, that kind of stuff. Okay, thanks, guys.